All right, here we go. Hi, y'all. I am very happy to be here today with Ariel Carson, who I first met when we both worked as mentors for Upward Bound in Mars Hill, North Carolina. Ariel has gone on to study chemistry and went to medical school in Anguilla. Is that how you say it?
Anguilla.
Anguilla, thank you. And she's currently looking for work and living in Atlanta with her husband. And she agreed to talk to me a little bit about what her life is like right now. So thank you so much for talking to me, Ariel. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
We'll start off by just having you, if you can, tell me a little bit about your life journey. I don't want this to be the whole thing, so I'll stop you if it gets too in depth. But tell me a little bit about where you're from. Why were you interested in science? Where did you go to school? Yeah, that type of thing.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Micro, North Carolina. Very, 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 very small town with one stoplight. Traditional Southern town. Usually everybody just stayed there. And I don't remember who told me, but they said, if you get the chance to go far, far away. So
you took that advice.
I did. I really did. So then I went to Mars Hill College. I was inspired to pick up chemistry because of my high school chemistry teacher. The way that she explained everything, it was very easy to understand. I was like, this is so much easier than biology. Biology, you're not doing anything but memorizing information. So at least with chemistry, you have to figure out some stuff. And I was really good at math. So that was why I went into chemistry.
And then, so I knew you were studying chemistry when we were all in Upward Bound together. And then I got a message from you later and you were like, oh, I'm in Anguilla. And I was like, where is that? So were you doing some medical school there? What were you doing?
Yes, yeah. I actually went to medical school in Anguilla.
Which is in the Caribbean, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So I had beaches and sunshine
right.
for 2 years. It was beautiful there. I learned a lot there, not necessarily about this, like in school, you learn a lot there, but I learned a lot about the culture, about how sometimes you just need to slow it down because everything was slow. And Atlanta is not a fast-paced city by any means. Like everybody says it's slow compared to New York and Chicago. And to slow it down to Anguilla speed is a different speed. Like things get done on their time when they feel like it. There's no rush to do anything. But it's a different type of calmness there too. So,
would you say it was even slower than where you grew up in Micro?
Yes.
Yeah, right. When I share this, I'll give a little bit of information about it because I still know very little about it. But do they they must speak English, I guess, if you were going to school there,
yes.
Or stuff like that, right?
Yes.
Right. It must be very small.
Yes, it's near St. Martin.
Okay, I have heard of St. Martin.
A lot of people will go to St. Martin and then take a ferry over to Anguilla.
Right.
And actually bigger than St. Martin. It's just that St. Martin is more built up.
Okay. And you were there for 2 years?
Almost 2 years. I was there 18 months exact.
Right. That's cool. Was it and you kind of, so was it like a master's or was it what?
So while you're on the island, you actually do like the first 2 years of traditional medical school where you do nothing but book work and learn and learn. Until after the first 2 years, you're supposed to take a USMLE, United States Medical License Exam, step 1. There's 3 of them, and you're supposed to step 1. And then, so I started studying for the step 1, and then I realized like, oh my gosh, I have a lot of student loan debt. And so I should probably start cleaning this up. And that's when I just, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just fix this and then I'm gonna just let this go.
Right. Okay. So I didn't realize that. So you were looking at like looming student loans and more student loans were required for you to keep going. So you kind of put it on pause a little bit.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. And that was maybe like what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or something like that. What did that?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit more with that medical background. We'll talk a little bit more about the pandemic in a moment, but tell me first, what brought you to Atlanta and how have you been affected by the pandemic, both personally and professionally?
Okay. So, my husband and I moved back to Atlanta from Chicago, actually. We were living in Chicago. He was
Wow.
closer to family,
Mm-hmm.
wanted to escape the brutal winters. We were actually there when it was like -30 that one day, and that was the point where we said, no, we can't do this anymore. So we moved to Atlanta so we could be close to family, start a family. And so when we do start a family, we'll actually have people around that can babysit. Sounds kind of bad, but I mean, hey,
That's I
this
mean, so family support is really important, like when you have kids.
it really is.
Yeah.
Plus we've been away for about 2.5 years. So we I really think it was good because it made us have like a strong foundation and things. So the pandemic comes, we're just living life, vacationing a lot
Yeah,
because
I saw.
are the people that I don't know why, but we just enjoy cruising.
I saw.
Like so fun to us, but now like they're trying to make cruising look so bad, but that's a whole nother story. But the
Yeah.
pandemic comes. We saw it kind of coming when we were on the cruise ship and they were talking about the virus, but it still wasn't as big of a deal yet.
Mm.
We come back home because we went on the cruise in February for my birthday. And then we come back home, everything's going all right. And next thing you know, jobs start closing and like people are getting laid off. I'm like, okay.
Because your husband has been employed this
Yes.
time. Yeah, you said he was working in IT, I think, or
Yes.
something
He
like that.
works in
Yeah.
IT
Yeah.
at a contact lens manufacturing company.
Okay. All right. All right.
So then all of a sudden, some of these manufacturing companies that make some type of medical device will find a way to say that they are an essential business and need to stay employed and need to stay functioning. It didn't make any sense to me.
Right. Right.
That's what they were doing. So my husband had to continue to work. My position, my company, they continued to work because they made medical devices, even though these medical devices are not going to be things that people need right now because they canceled all surgeries that were elective.
Okay. So you were working at this time. I don't think I realized that as well. So you were still, okay.
So
Right.
then March 31st comes.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the day in America where majority of people who are unemployed now were laid off.
Yeah.
And they really couldn't have done it in better timing. Like they did it at a time where everybody's health benefits would come into play because that's the last time you'll be able to use it. You wouldn't be able to use it for April at all.
Right. Right.
It was just a lot of things that
Mm.
led up to that point. And there's of course no severance package or anything. Like they just laid everybody off.
And did that happen where you were working?
Yes,
Yeah.
they
Right.
laid off. They said 12 people, but I'm pretty sure it was more than that.
Right. Right. So right at the start of April, when also just this, I guess the virus is spreading and everybody's freaking out and everything like that. But your husband was able to keep working, so that's
They actually
cool.
gave him a letter in case he was stopped by police because they had started instituting quarantine rules, and they gave him a
Yeah.
letter that he had the right to go to work.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy. Did you? Yeah.
Very.
Well, so that means that they were really cracking down on people being out unless it was for work, I guess. Like, were there fines or like stuff like that?
There was no way to punish people, so I don't understand why they were doing this.
And was like, and what? So did you obviously like? I guess you guys have probably been staying in a bit more when this is going on. But like, did you notice like if you ever went for a drive or anything like that? And we'll start talking about some of the protests in a moment. But did you notice like the streets were emptier? Like like, could you not go out to eat as much and stuff like that, like all those type things?
You couldn't go out to eat at all the
Yeah.
restaurants closed,
Right.
except for a takeout.
Mm-hmm.
Driving past a Steak and Shake, you remember what that is?
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah.
3 cars in the parking lot.
Right.
3.
Right.
McDonald's is like well, the lines are wrapped around McDonald's, Chick-fil-A,
Right.
other restaurants, but it's just like
Lots of fast food. Right.
yeah.
Right.
The fast food restaurants were allowed to stay open. Some restaurants tried to stay open, and this do only. A lot of the small businesses relied on Grubhub, Uber Eats,
yeah,
Postmates, and DoorDash and all that. But it's kind of crazy how it all happened.
When you were on a cruise in February.
Yes.
So like, was anybody in the cruise like, like, was there hand sanitizer? Nobody was thinking about
There's
it.
There's always hand sanitizer and hand washing stations around a cruise. A cruise is actually very clean. So when it came out that the Princess Cruise had the virus passing through, I was actually kind of confused.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's all about, I think it's just the sharing of like buffets and stuff like that, and the fact that there's, I mean, I don't know.
Not to be funny or anything, but they literally people cleaning all the time. Right. Well, so I don't know how they can increase it, but I will say this: like when we took Norwegian, what was it, last year? They literally face you down when you walk in to hand sanitize your hands.
Right.
Like they do not.
I feel like they know though. They're like, we got to keep this place clean. We can't get anybody sick. But
and it's partially because of the norovirus.
The norovirus?
Norovirus. Yes. It's more prevalent on cruise ships.
What is
it's from people not washing their hands, basically.
Right. Man, well, everyone I've talked to, everyone's been like, yeah, we all learned a little bit about germs and washing our hands and stuff like that. But I guess, so you were on the cruise and you came back, and then slowly everyone started losing their jobs and all of this stuff happened. So I guess from like with your chemistry background, I know chemistry is not the same as virology and I'm not a scientific person at all, but did you have from your kind of scientific background, did you think much about what was going to happen? Like, or were you worried, or I don't know, what were your thoughts? Because I was watching it in January in China, and I wasn't thinking too much about it, and then it became more and more serious in my head. But yeah, what were you? Tell me a little bit about that.
At that time, I thought it was actually like the flu.
Yeah, right.
I really did, because I was looking at the fact, it was like the flu kills more people every winter than this virus is killing.
Yeah.
So I honestly didn't understand the big deal.
Right.
But from a contagious standpoint, the flu is not as contagious as this virus.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy how they say, like, if you don't wear a mask, you're like, I think it was like, just putting on a mask, you're 75% less of a chance of getting the virus if you're around somebody. I was like, this is crazy. Like, if you has the flu, as long as they don't sneeze, you're fine. But you can kind of be around them and be okay. With this, they're saying, like, just being around the people, you get it.
Right.
It's very confusing.
Right. Are you seeing are there a lot of people in Atlanta wearing masks?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's sure.
Cool.
I wish I had taken a video yesterday. I could have sent it to you.
Yeah. Send it to me.
You go to Walmart.
Yeah.
Everybody is masked.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
A handful of people that don't.
Yeah. Right.
And then some people, they like judge people. They give you the side eye if you don't wear your mask. Because sometimes I only forget it in the car. Yeah. And people are looking at me like. It's kind of crazy.
I am so glad we've got it under control. Hopefully in Australia, they're seeing a little bit more of it in one of the states. but it's just so crazy how the mask issue has seemed to really divide people. And I mean, I understand it, and I do hope I do think you should wear it, young lady. but but it is really, I hate, it's kind of like a lot of things. I just worry. I feel like I've been watching, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, is I feel like the U.S. is so divided right now, and I feel like it's kind of getting worse than I saw. A lot of stuff happening in Atlanta. We saw Ahmaud Arbery is from Georgia, and then we saw Rayshard Brooks. Is that his name? We saw two different Black men unarmed killed in the past like 2 months in Georgia, in a state that doesn't have a great reputation with racism. So I was going to ask if you could tell me, and then we saw a lot of protests in Atlanta. We were talking about the mayor, Keisha Bottoms, who has kind of come to shine, and a lot of people have been looking at her and watching her. What were you guys thinking, you and your husband, as some of the protests happen, as some of these murders happen? Did you go to any of the protests? Have you had experiences with, like, bad experiences with police? If you're okay with talking about any of that stuff, and it's totally fine if you're not, but yeah.
Well, I'll preface it with this. So when I was in high school, I actually volunteered at the EMS station.
Right.
And it's in North Carolina, Southern, typical people there. And sometimes there would be comments made around the station, and I wouldn't say anything. Like, we had one coworker, he was a dark-skinned Black man, and they would make jokes sometimes that if he turned off the light, we'd only be able to see his eyes and his teeth.
Yeah.
And they made this comment regularly, and he was that type of person to just brush it off and let it go. Mm-hmm. But honestly, in that time, we shouldn't have never done that. We should have actually done something.
Yeah.
But that's just the culture we grew up in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Later on, my brother actually became a firefighter, for the fire in there as well. And then, sometimes they would make comments about him, being the dark-skinned guy, always there, and people would say stuff, and, we would just, my brother and I would just always just go. Looking back now, we probably should have never done that, and probably just said, that's not respectful. You wouldn't talk to somebody else like this, so why would you talk to us like this? But
it's also so frustrating, because it's like, I would hope that somebody would say something to someone before it would have to be you guys to say something like that. Like, that should have, like, it's like, yeah, that's not
like
cool.
Some of them knew to never cross that line, and they were like the people I remember the most. The people who crossed the line, I don't remember them.
Yeah.
It sounds bad, but
yeah,
I blocked them out. But the people who were the most respectful, I remember them.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
But that's one part of it. So law enforcement, it's like a double-edged sword. We as a community, we would call them only if we really, really absolutely had to. Like, nobody wants to call the police because of fear of everything that's happened in the past, 400 years, I guess I would say. You have, even back when we were children, you had the Rodney incident in LA.
Yep.
That was actually, publicized, and everybody saw what was going on then. Now, with the use of smartphones and everything else, where you can just FaceTime somebody and then they can see everything, I think that's helping and hurting at the same time. A lot of people are saying we should just defund the police as a whole. I don't really think so, but I think that something should be done, because my husband actually got a speeding ticket a couple weeks ago. He didn't tell me until he came home. If he had told me that he had actually gotten stopped, I probably would have panicked. I actually in college used to worry about my younger brother. My younger brother was a dark skinned, very tall, big build Black man, but a giant. He was goofy. He luckily worked for the fire department and that helped out his case. But he shouldn't have to announce who he is and who he works for just so he can be respected the same way.
Yeah.
That's just scary.
Yeah.
Then I have another younger brother here in Atlanta. Not so much worried because Atlanta, the demographics of Atlanta is more for Black people than it is, other races. I will just say that for sure. But in Carolina, the demographics are completely different where we grew up. So I wasn't worried for my brother. Unfortunately, while I was in medical school, he was in a motorcycle accident. And so in a nursing home ever since. But I can say that is not one of my worries anymore. It sounds really sad. I hate the situation the way it came out, but the worry about if he were to be stopped by police or anything of that nature.
Yeah, that's really heavy. I'm sorry to hear that.
And then I always used to say this, but it's really more prevalent now than anything. While I was growing up, when I was in high school, you know how girls always learn how to put on makeup from their mom?
Oh, yes.
Instead of getting a lesson on how to put on makeup, I was getting the speech of, you are a Black woman in this society. You already have two things against you, or you are Black, number one, and number two, you're a woman. So you already have two strikes against you. So you have to work that much harder to get where you're going to go. And I thought about this all throughout college, but college taught me a lot, but I think I learned the most about how society and everything else about life was, and my eyes were completely open when I moved to Anguilla.
Yeah.
There we had some people from India, Pakistan. We had some people from Africa. I had some friends that were from Zimbabwe, Somalia. Everybody coming from everywhere, and all those cultures have to get along.
Yeah.
So there, I have to say I learned the most because all of us had different experiences with racism and things of that nature. But I think the craziest experience, the story, it is really something. So we were all at school one day, and we had a friend. He had went home, and he didn't have an Anguilla license. The police were known to just set up shop anywhere and just do a checkpoint just to check for licenses. And this guy was coming back to school, and he was like, oh, shoot, it's a checkpoint, and he didn't have a license. So, he told the truth and everything, but they wrote him a ticket. And then he had to stop, put the car on the side of the road, and then his friend had to come back and get the car. And he was like, I don't understand why they stopped me. I feel like they only stopped me because I'm white. And so all of us looked at him and was like, the same thing happens in America all the time. It's just that you don't experience it. He's like, well, that's reverse racism. I said, no, it's not. I was like, it happens all the time in America. You finally see, and then after that moment, he had like a deep respect for everybody of color. It did not make any sense. All his friends were people of color. He didn't really want anything to do with the white people because he was really interested in learning about our experiences. It's crazy.
That's interesting. Well, I do think that just in general, when you can be around a lot of different cultures, it just, you could learn so much. And I think I miss, particularly like when I lived in Washington, D.C., I lived with a lot of different people from a lot of different countries and backgrounds. And I think, I hope that that's what Black Lives Matter at the end of the day is kind of is for us to and understand that some people, but not it's not just, I don't know, I think that everybody's individual experiences do affect the way that their lives are, and your life, and what your parents have told you, and fears about police and stuff like that. That's legitimate, and I haven't dealt with those, but I yeah, I hope that, and it's easy for me to say this as someone who hasn't had to deal with a lot of those things, but I hope that we can all, that this can shape the world in a better way in some capacity. But yeah, I mean, it's hard because when you're when we're kind of separate and we have separate lives, and we're not experiencing a lot of different multiculturalism, I think it's harder to understand when we don't talk to people from different backgrounds. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to have to read more about Anguilla after this, and who's there, and then what it's like.
If you can remember back whenever we first met at Upward Bound at Mars Hill. Mars Hill was a predominantly white area.
Yep.
Some of those kids had never seen a Black man other than on TV until they met one of our coworkers.
Yeah.
And they were in shock that he was very well-mannered and respectful. They were confused.
Yeah. Well,
and it's crazy, but that's how we've been portrayed on TV. So that's what they assume, but that's not the type of person he was.
I think sometimes about like living in places in Atlanta and living in the South versus like people that live in the Midwest, where it's like a very heavily all white, like Anglo-Saxon community. And I like to think that just by being around more people with different backgrounds, and it's also like people from different income levels and people who speak different languages. It's a lot of different things. I like to think that we learn from that, but then I worry because also the South has been integrated for a long time, but the South has one of the worst histories of racism ever, you know? So
my husband actually went to college not too far from where Ahmaud Arbery was murdered.
Really?
And his first thing was, why was he jogging? Like, doesn't he know that area is just heavily racist? You know? I mean, maybe he was just trying to be fit. I don't know.
Yeah, but I
it's sad you can't go for a jog.
Yeah. And it's so sad, and I find it so. I don't know what to do. I think it's good to talk to people, and I've had more conversations with people in the last month about these type of things, with white people, with people of color, with people from all sorts of different backgrounds. And I think that it's crazy that this movement has started these conversations that maybe we should be having a lot more. But it is, it does make you feel probably, I know it makes me feel uncomfortable, but I know, as the saying goes, imagine dealing with it all the time, 24/7 and stuff like that. So shut up, Alex.
Yeah, like for instance, like going in the store. My brother went into a store one time. The lady followed him around the store because she thought he stole something.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
My brother, the gentle giant. No, of course. But it's just insane. Like things of that. Just things like that. Just
Well, this is, and I was talking to, I talked to my friend Crush about this a few weeks ago, and I also worry that even if it only happens 1 or 2 times, I think I wonder that there might be a weight with that. Like, it's not so much about the one time, it's this knowledge and this worry that is around you that people might see you differently for no reason other than what you look like. You know, it's not, but yeah, what do you think? Like, do you think that what was happening in Atlanta with the protests and stuff like that? Do you think that was? What were your thoughts around that? Did you guys participate, or?
We didn't participate. I watched the coverage on TV.
Yeah.
It was entertainment for me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what exactly people were doing and people were saying. Getting down to downtown Atlanta, it would probably taken me over an hour.
Yeah.
Parking spot and everything.
Yeah,
I didn't even bother.
yeah, yeah.
But they did protest at the mall not too far from my house. Of closing the mall and kicking everybody out, basically, because they didn't want anything to happen to the mall.
Right.
I think some of the things that were done at the protest were valid, like okay to peacefully do it, but then and started destroying the CNN Center and the businesses around it, and I'm like, no, that's defeating the purpose. You had the Rayshard Brooks murder. They protested around there, and then all of a sudden, the Wendy's is on fire. And it's like, come on. But then they zoom in on the video. The people who are actually vandalizing the property are not people that are with the Black Lives Matter. That's the part that's really, really crazy.
I think that's... Go ahead.
No.
No, well, I just think that's one of the frustrating things is a lot of people, I was reading on social media, a lot of people were very happy to defend like some of the things happening before knowing who was doing it. And I think that kind of matters as well, because a lot of the stuff on Black Lives Matter website and stuff like that, I think they're about civil disobedience, but I think their mode is doing it peacefully. And a lot of people are unemployed right now and have nothing to lose. So it's not necessarily somebody who's really passionate about like stopping police brutality. It might just be somebody who's like kind of unhinged. But I mean, we're all talking about it now. It's still going on. We're all talking about it. So I mean, in some ways, from a big picture perspective, we're all more aware of it and thinking about it than ever before. I've been watching Atlanta. It seems like there was a lot of protests. Are they still protesting now too much?
Not as much. I haven't heard much.
Yeah.
But it's kind of crazy how you have to put out laws banning discrimination against hair. You have to put out things banning discrimination. Like, you shouldn't have to ban discrimination for anything.
Yeah.
If his resume looks good and they fit the job description, then hire them. It shouldn't matter what they look like.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. It's not even, it's like, why do we have to, like, I was reading about one of the problems with what happened with Ahmaud is that there's not, I think, laws against hate speech or hate crimes.
There's no law against hate crimes in Georgia.
Yes, that's what it is. Yes, the hate crimes. Thank you. Yeah. So there's not more severe punishment for what happened to them. And also it's like, why do we have to create hate crimes? Because why does anyone create any crime? Why does anybody ever do anything? But I guess isn't it crazy that we have to tell people that they have to do the right thing when it comes to being kind to other human beings rather than people knowing it?
Sadly, yeah, you do. It sounds so stupid. It's like you teach this in preschool.
Yeah.
Hey, be nice to your classmates. The sad thing is you're telling it was a father and son, so I'm pretty sure the father is probably in his 50s. You have to tell a 50-something-year-old this?
Yeah.
He should have learned this 50-something years ago.
Yeah. But there and those kind of examples are good and are sad. But then you said something when we were messaging the other day. You were saying you didn't even feel like it was important that you went to school. And I wondered if you could talk about that, although I'm afraid the answer is going to make me sad, but that's okay.
So a big reason that I've been doing a lot of reading, watching YouTube videos. Some of the reasons that people think that Black people are behind, let's just be 100% real. The reason they're behind is because of economics. Of course, you have the history of redlining where Blacks weren't able to get mortgages, and then when they were, the mortgages were the interest was outrageous, so they couldn't even afford the mortgages. And then it also put us in specific communities. I can even say for sure my grandma was one of the only Blacks in the town of Micro, probably for a while.
Right.
Her family, luckily, was like one of the only families that could pretty much live there, and she stayed. She was to acquire land there, and she'll be able to give it to me and my cousins whenever she does pass. But how easy was it for her to get? I'm pretty sure it wasn't, because there's nobody else in the town of Micro that has land like that, like an anomaly. So if you look at it from that standpoint, I remember my mom, she used to work for this white lady. She literally slept on this lady's floor just to make sure she didn't die. They paid her to make sure she didn't die. If she needed to get up in the middle of the night, my mom would help her and everything like that.
Right.
But every year at Christmas, my mom said that she would lay out on the table $10,000 that she would give to each of her children.
Right.
When she passed, she gave the house to her children with the furniture business that they had. So if you have family that is going to continue to give you generational wealth, you have no other way but to be wealthy.
Yeah.
Typically in Black families, if you weren't able to acquire any property, what are you giving your children?
Yeah.
Nothing. My father passed on and he didn't really leave us anything because, I mean, could he? I mean, it was pretty rough for him. I mean, yes, he died of heart disease, but it's just, you know, looking at it from that standpoint. My grandmother here in Georgia, she did leave my father a house, but I don't think it was paid for. So then you get stuck like that. How can you keep generational wealth coming if you can't get it? So my goal now is that for my future generation, if me and my husband have children, if we don't, it will go to my nieces and nephews. But my whole family the thing is, we want to leave something for our children. We don't want to leave them empty-handed. We're left empty-handed.
Yeah.
Going to college, I think it was great in some things, but in some things it wasn't. I think it's no secret at this point that most of the people who we actually had this conversation back during Upward Bound, that I luckily got to go to undergrad with no student loans. I think I had like $6,000 in student loans when I got done.
Wow.
I was a lucky one. Most people came out with 30, 40,000. When I got done pursuing medicine, I had over 100. So that's already putting me in the hole. Most of the kids that I was going to school with had people paying for their school. So they didn't have to worry about it. They were down there just, you know, spending money, living life. And I was one of the ones like, oh no, I can't afford to do that. I can't do this. I can't do that. So just looking at it from that standpoint, after I have become a doctor, I still would have been in the hole. I would have had this big thing on my back saying, hey, you got $200,000 in debt that you need to pay off. So in the first few years, I mean, you know how doctors, they get the new house, the new car. I been able to do it because I would have this big old monkey on my back of student loans.
And it's one of those things where just to have a foot in the door, to already have either, to have some sort of support, if it's a scholarship, it's a family member or something like that to help you, then it's, you know, my parents paid for my college and I just did my undergraduate, but had that not have happened, I don't even know if I would have gone. And like the whole issue of student loans in America in the past, like 20 years, it has gotten ridiculous, you know, like it is
actually, if you watch, there's a guy on YouTube, his name is Money Guy Talk Show. The guy who started the company went to Georgia State. guy that's sitting next to him went to Georgia State, I think, 10 years later. And then they had a turn that went 10 years after that. Mm-hmm. He said the amount of how much it cost for them to go to school through those 20 years inflated, I think it was by like 80%. It was ridiculous. Yeah. He said it was only like $4,000 a year for him to go when he was going. But the intern has like, I think 30 or 40,000 in student loan. Mm-hmm. So it's all bad. The salaries haven't changed in those 20 years for the same job. So it's just like, what are we supposed to do?
I do, and I worry about America. And then so there's like there's issues of racism, and there's also just inequality, and it's people are becoming more and more in debt. And I really hope, because I think that a lot of people that are experiencing a lot of these, especially financial problems, like I don't know, I worry because I think sometimes a lot of poor white people tend to support Trump. But I think that we can all, and I don't want to get this too political, but I mean, a lot of people are being oppressed in the same way, regardless of their skin color, and it's an opportunity for us to fight back a little bit. So I hate, like I think I was saying earlier, I hate how polarized we are because, or what, I don't know, I haven't been in the United States for 10 years, but I hate how polarized the United States strikes me at the moment. I feel like we're talking about masks, we're talking about, like all of that type of stuff. So do you think, I mean, it's maybe some of the things that happened, like when you were starting school, you're not, you kind of started to change your mind as the bills started stacking up, and you want, and I love what you said. I didn't even talk about earlier, just kind of the idea of if you guys have kids to leave something for them. And I think that's a great goal. And I think that the US that is something that all people should be able to do for their children, and it's so frustrating because if there were the 40 acres and a mule bits of land, I hadn't thought about that in a while, but I'm sure you're familiar with the 40 acres and a mule that were promised and never delivered after that. So, I mean, it's just so frustrating because I think so many, if things were done differently before, then it might not be such a challenging thing to say, I just want to leave my kids with something, So, yeah. But I'm glad that you've been able to have some work, and I'm sorry that you lost your job at the beginning of the pandemic. I'm glad that your husband still has a job. Is there anything, sounds like things are pretty crazy in Atlanta with everything going on, but are you feeling optimistic at all about anything or thinking of any silver linings or anything like that?
I think we're kind of probably in the middle of the storm right now.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense how the housing market, homes are at an all-time high, but and the stock market is doing fine, but the unemployment rate is really, really high.
I know. What the heck?
And then now businesses all of a sudden want to have more diversity with their executive staff. But instead of just having it as the diversity and inclusion officer, that's normally, because working in the science field, I can tell you for sure, like it's not that many people that look like me. I have pretty much come accustomed to being the only one at the table that looks like me. Especially at my last position, I was probably one of the only higher ranked type people. Everybody else that looked like me worked on the production floor.
Yeah.
It's only been a few places where that wasn't the case, and then it's a lot of, I want to say the last few positions I've had, I've been overqualified for, but I took it because nobody else was giving me a chance. I think part of that, of course, has to do with networking, but how can you network if your network doesn't include people that have seats at the table?
Yeah.
So it's like a double-edged sword.
Yes, the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Who you know.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like kind of used to think that was a funny expression, but then lately I've been thinking about it because it's like, um, I don't know, there's a little bit of accountability that maybe we need to think about when we say that expression, and using your power to to bring other people with you. But I am also really glad that you were
You can
as
see that. You can see that with the current White House. Like
oh
everybody that's
yeah,
in
the
office is
freaking
people he did favors for.
yeah,
Like
or his own family, or his sons and daughters that are running half this stuff. But
people who are completely not qualified to do a job, but
mm,
they're doing the job. Like who's in charge of education. She never had to take out a student loan in her life. So of
yeah,
course it makes sense for her to pretty much dismantle the student loan program.
yeah,
Of
yeah,
course you
I
would want
know.
to fund private schools with federal dollars instead of public schools that are struggling. Why is my cousin having to teach at a public school where, the kids can't afford lunch and things of that nature? Like that doesn't make sense as to why things are going on the way they are.
Yeah. My friend Crush asked him what he thought about everything, and he was like, I sure do love seeing racists get fired. And I was like, I thought it was funny, but also, I don't know, I do. And he was bringing up, like, are all these companies actually very serious about I guess, employing more people of color, or is it just kind of a pandering thing where you put the hashtag Black Lives Matter and stuff like that? And I don't even know, like, if it's, it, I don't think you need the hashtag Black Lives Matter to do some of these things. Like, I think it's also just about,
That has actually bothered me.
yeah.
Even the NFL came out and said, "We hear you. We understand what you were protesting for," because that was a big thing with Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Take a knee. And my family and I actually discussed this last
Mm-hmm.
week. Whenever you take a knee like that, you can go back to even biblical times. That was basically a sign of serving somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Even the knees, whenever Jesus came out and they were serving him. So it actually should have been a sign of reverence that he
I was,
was doing. He
that's
took a
what,
knee for the flag, but they
yeah.
insult, and I'm like, but how? I'm just not understanding.
I think you're right. I thought it was really funny how people found it so disrespectful, because whenever has kneeling been disrespectful? Like, if they were flipping the bird,
That's different. That's different. But he didn't even do that, and now all of a
yeah,
sudden they're looking for the teams are trying to look
yeah,
at job now, and I was like, I'm not even sure I would even take it
yeah,
if it was
yeah,
me, because it
yeah,
would look like a pity statement.
yeah, yeah. Tokenism isn't a problem, and it's been really interesting for me, even just doing these interviews, because I was started off interviewing people about the pandemic, and all of a sudden, these protests were happening, and I was just feeling like I hate it, because I think it is important to include a variety of voices, but I don't want it to seem tokenistic. But I would feel, but then it's also not about me either way, like I said. So it's kind of like, shut up, Alex. I just think I'm glad that you're talking to me about your experiences, both being in Atlanta and also as a Black woman, and also being from the South, and the different things you've experienced. But I do wonder sometimes, like with everything that's been done, will we ever be able to get it right in the United States? I worry. I don't know.
I don't know. I
you know?
honestly don't know.
Yeah.
Um, it's just like I was talking to my husband the other night, and I was telling him about you.
Mm-hmm.
I had this friend named Alex. We worked together, Upward Bound, and she was able to just uproot her whole life and go to Australia.
Mm.
When we went to Europe last year, I was kind of terrified and kind of excited.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited. I'm going to be able to go to Rome and do this and do that. But at the same time, I'm on Instagram checking other Black travelers and seeing how their experiences were when they went over there. Because I've heard that some countries, they are not very accepting of our kind,
Mm-hmm.
just my color of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
It was very obvious even on the cruise ship. that people were like, every time, it's kind of crazy, but every time, I mean, Black people saw each other, we was like, oh, hey, it's you too. Because it was literally not that many of us, and we kind of felt uncomfortable. Cruising to the Caribbean, I mean, we're all on the ship, like we everywhere. But it's like when we did a Mediterranean cruise, it was just like, and then sometimes we would get looks like, oh, you can afford to do this? Like, that's the way I feel.
Right.
And it's just, having to worry about, okay, is this country nothing of our kind, or are they going to be a little wary about us? I don't know.
Yeah. So. I just wonder, like, if there are so many ways that I've been advantaged in the fact that I've been able to have like a life and a career here. Like I can't think about it too much because part of me is like, how much did you actually get here on your own merit, Alex? Let's be honest. But
I think you remember the conversation you had with me, Crystalline, and I think Todd about when you told us, you was like, I think I want to move to Australia after I graduate. Crystal looked at you like, huh? Because it's something we would never ever think about. We're like, no, we have to stay close to family, make sure nothing happens to this person, this and that, having everything in order.
Yeah.
It's just like you were able to do it. And I do about you, but I mean, it's just like, I don't think I can do it.
And like, I think it's also like, it's about being able to feel like you can do it, and that if you fail, you'll be able to go back home, and that it's not as much of a risk. Like, it is an incredibly privileged position to be in. But at the same time, I envision a world where everybody can feel like they can do that. You know what I mean? Like, I would love, and I love it that you go on your cruises and that you've been to Europe and that you lived in Anguilla, which I'm still saying weird. No, but it's also, and I won't take up too much of your time, Ariel. I think this is going to be the longest one we've done yet. But when I went to Nicaragua, by myself for about 11 days, and it was one of the most beautiful trips I've ever done, but it was also one of the most terrified times I've ever been. And part of that was because I didn't speak great Spanish, but I do think part of it is we don't realize how it feels to be other until we are. And when I came to Australia, I could pretty easily blend in with most people. And where I've been in other parts of Europe, I feel like, and this was a place where I don't even think my skin color was part of it, but it was just like, I felt very obviously like a Westerner. And I guess that's something I wish we talked, like sometimes it's when what you were talking about, seeing like Black people on this cruise ship and kind of like feeling that connection, we can't help but gravitate sometimes towards people that we feel look like us. And I hate that. Like, I don't think that's good, but I also think perhaps it's something that we can talk about, and it doesn't have to mean that we believe we're in a hierarchical system of better and worse. It's just more about but maybe, and that's why I think travel is so good, is because when I was in that situation, I think for the first time, and a few other situations, it's just a reminder that you don't know how comfortable you are all the time just by being around people that look like you. So yeah. Do you know anyone who's had COVID-19? I know I was talking to a few people about, you haven't met a single person that's had it, right? Wow.
Oh, my sister-in-law is a nurse, and she works technically with the OBGYN side.
Yep.
Don't think she's seen too many people with it.
Yeah.
But every time somebody sneezes around there, they're all. But I do, like, it's been a serious thing. They actually were running out of masks where she was at, and I was like, you work for a major health system, not understanding how they're running out. Her mother's a nurse, and I mean, I think her mother was with geriatrics, so she might have seen some, but our family, we still haven't.
Good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And I hope that the cases go down and you guys stay safe and that you can start getting some like good, better
the cases
work
go down. I don't know if you guys have been updated, but the cases are actually going
I
up.
know. Georgia's like keeps rising. I saw that it's had over 80,000 cases. So
Florida is really, really rising. California is rising. They're going back to closing the bars. They're pretty much going to start instituting quarantine again.
Yeah.
But New York is a good example of who to follow on real. Because the cases are...
And they're not letting people from the South in, I don't.
No, they're not. They put us on a list of do not let enter.
Yeah.
Unless to quarantine for 14 days.
Gosh. Please stay safe and wash your hands and use the sanitizer. I'm so worried about everyone I know in America. It's funny because I have seen a few people who have been affected by it quite personally, like people have lost loved ones. But I hate it because I think that you can't take it that seriously until you start seeing something happen, and it almost has to spread more. So I hope that you guys keep looking after yourself. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention or say about the pandemic or this moment in history or politics or racism or back in the day at Upward Bound or anything like that, Ariel?
I think we're moving forward in the fight against racism. I just don't think some experiences can be replicated.
Yeah.
So it is a constant fact of the matter that every child that's Black has to grow up having the speech of, you are a Black child, you have this notch against you, you are going to have to work twice as hard. Whenever Obama became president, it was actually hoped that we could do anything we wanted to do. But then when 45 came into play, that's what I call it. When he came into play and he's literally just putting racist tweets up and saying everything without a filter. Nobody is running his Twitter. He's actually running it, which is strange.
I know.
It completely puts you back in the mindset like, so everything that Martin Luther King fought for is basically just gone down the drain. Then I'm just reading more and more. People are actually looking into the Constitution. We were actually never given any rights, really. We were just supposedly released from slavery, and that's it. We were never given rights for it. There's so many disadvantages that they have given us, but at the same time, we have Beyonce and Jay-Z who give us hope. And it sounds funny, but they're billionaires. Yeah. So it gives us hope that it can be done. It's just get there is probably the problem.
Yeah. And I also I know what you mean about Obama and I remember an election night that when he was elected and there was just this electricity in the room. And I remember I was in a room with so many different types of people from so many different backgrounds and so many different colors and genders and blah, 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 blah. And I felt like we all felt like we were on the same team and we were moving towards something that we all believed in. And that's why I think when things changed and we saw it was like we went backwards. I felt like, and I hate that, and I hate it because I mean it's like part of me wants to say, what if African Americans didn't tell their children that you have to watch out? Like what if it affects your psyche in a negative way to hear that all the time? And what if you were able to, but what if that was dangerous as well? You see what I'm saying? Like, so what if you don't tell your children to be careful, then it might be the death of them. But I wonder about when I think about my lack of fear when going to another country, just because I was able to kind of believe that everything will be fine. But I mean, the reality is there are more dangers out there for people of color. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling. But
no, you're fine, but you're right. Because it's like I worry about my sorority sisters. Some of them have interracial marriages. I was worried that their children won't be given this talk. And when go out to the world, they're gonna think that everything is peaches and rainbows when it's not.
Yeah.
Because growing up as a mixed child, yes, you are white and black, but at the same time, the world is going to see you as black.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you're going to be treated completely different from the way one of your parents was.
Yeah. 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 And you don't want, that's something where you don't get to learn the hard way, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's a heavy topic.
It is. It's very heavy, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you being able to talk about this type of heavy stuff with me because, and also I think, you know, a lot of people in Australia don't quite know the situation in Australia is different from the United States. Racism, of course, exists in Australia, but it is a different situation than what is happening in the United States, I think is okay to say. So it's just good to hear different voices and different perspectives, and it's also just lovely to see you. I have so many fun memories of like just laughing until my belly hurts with you and Todd and Crystal and Mitch, just like I don't even remember what, I just remember just like laughing. That was like the summer that we laughed so much.
Nah, I remember that game we played where we were playing like hide and seek.
Yeah.
That was like, I don't know, adult version hide and seek is that was a great game.
Was that in the dorms?
Yes. We remember it was like we locked off some of the rooms and then we put people in jail. And it was like somebody said it was a game called like Heaven or Hell or something like that.
All right.
You used to run around.
As long as it wasn't 7 minutes in heaven.
Yeah. It was hilarious.
Yes, those were beautiful memories, and I miss those guys. I hope Karen sees this. If she watches it to the end, hey Karen.
Hey Karen.
And Jasmine and Mitch.
Everybody.
Hey guys. All right, I will. I'm gonna hit stop recording in just a minute. But Ariel, thank you so much for talking to me, taking time out of your morning to talk to me today, and it was so good to see you.
Oh, thank you.